All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining. I think there's a couple main points that we all want to touch on today regarding esports and the development of the industry. Um, why don't we first introduce ourselves and then we can get into those. I'll start off. I'm Jack Mascone. I went by the gamer tag JBM back when I played esports. I played for Wizards District Gaming for 2 years. I was voted a controller player of the year finalist in 2021 across all esports, which was pretty cool. And now I'm working on two companies in the skill gaming industry.
I guess I can jump in as we are kind of managing this session on the fly as there have been some changes behind the scenes. My name is Neil Johnson. I work for a company called Alhi Associated Luxury Hotels International. I am currently the VP of Esports Sales and Consulting Services. And just a little quick background because I come from the gaming and esports world from a different sector, hospitality, tourism. As an organization, we represent a global collection of 4 and 5 diamond hotels and that are boutique or startup in kind of nature. And so we, like everybody, are getting into gaming and esports, and kind of that's my role here.
Awesome. I'll go next. Chris Scroggins, Academic Director of Esports at West Virginia University and CEO and co-founder of Esports Development and Growth Enterprise. So at WVU, we have Esports Business Entertainment program on the major side, and then a really great competitive program with former pros, current pros. So able to round out that experience for our learners by adding that academic component. And then on the edge front, we help colleges and universities launch academic and competitive programs that are looking to positively impact their learners through esports. And we also provide educational content and curriculum for 5th through 12th grade at the elementary, middle, and high school level as well. So kind of an academic focus, but also some business development. And as Jack kind of introduced, how can we continue to develop the industry overall, right? So really excited to be here today. And how about I toss it to Albert? You want to go?
Sure. Yeah. I'm Albert. Yeah, I'm the current general manager for NRG Esports, where I do their Overwatch program. I also am adjunct faculty for the esports program at American Public University. And prior to that, I've been in the esports industry for 6 years in a variety of roles. Started off as an analyst for Florida Mayhem, and I most recently, before I left to join NRG, I was the president of gaming for Misfits Gaming Group, and won a world championship in Overwatch in 2023. So yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Albert. I'll go next. So I'm currently the senior product manager at FitGamer. Pretty much FitGamer is a company where we are focusing on elevating players' health and wellness levels. So generally when people think about esports, they just think about it's just gaming, practicing, and building their skills there. But actually, as esports is growing, there's a huge health and wellness aspect that players have to undergo in order to kind of keep their career going, play at their peak performance, and increase their stamina levels overall. Now, a little about my background. Before this, I worked at Cloud9. I was a product manager there as well. We focused on player development. So we developed more direct-to-consumer and B2B products in the educational space, but also during the COVID space as well when the pandemic was going on, so that players can kind of develop on a professional level. Before that, I worked with ESL Faceit Group. I was a collegiate player at UCI as well, and I'm currently also an adjunct professor at Boise State University, and I teach esports management.
Craig, looks like you're on. All right, can you jump in or what's
Yeah,
up, my man?
good morning, good afternoon, depending on where everybody's located. Welcome, everybody. Excited to go ahead and have this panel. We have some amazing guests with us today. Craig Skilling, Director of Esports for APUS, also the founder of the Esports Pro Skills Academy here in South Florida. Looking forward to going ahead and engaging for the next 40 minutes or so with some phenomenal guests that are really going to be able to go ahead and take us to new heights. So we had a great opportunity to go ahead and hear from everybody and everybody's background, so we know we're getting something that is pretty phenomenal in terms of the diversity amongst the groups, and everybody comes from a different space. And we're talking about the future of gaming within this session, and each of you brings so much perspective. So I think we should just be able to go ahead and jump in. And we hear so much about esports and gaming, but there's those that are still looking to enter. All right, there are those that are trying to say, what is my entry into this industry? And whoever wants to jump in, I think we need to let them know, what do we think? What do we know based on research? Where is the future of esports and gaming? And we don't have to hype this up in terms of everything being positive. We know there's caveats within the industry. We know there's things that we have to say. So whoever wants to start us up, based on your experience, your expertise, and where you're seeing present day, what is the future of esports and gaming?
I think I'll jump in real quick, and I think two parts. One, I want to address Craig, how you talked about there are still some people that want to get into the space, and what is your entry? And I started in this space in 2016 with MGM Resorts, and so we had that very question: should we sponsor a team? How do we get into it? I think your entry level is what your expertise is, and then how you lend that to this space. At MGM Resorts, we were a hospitality and entertainment company. And so that's how we've got into this space, that we own physical venues. We also have hotel rooms, that have accommodations, and we have shopping, dining, entertainment on site that can help with that 360 total experience from a guest. So our entry from that level, that perspective, was as started from venues, and then how can we enhance the overall experience? Because initially, when I first came into space, the experience was the competitive stage, and then the lobby bar, and that was it. That was a total 360 experience for gaming and esports. In my current capacity now, with Associate Luxury Hotels International, our entry level is now, we are a collection of 4 and 5 diamond hotels. And now, in this age of consolidation, of companies going out of business with the esports winter, we are in a period of differentiation and leveling up. And so our entry into this space now is in terms of how do we level up that experience. A lot of times in gaming and esports, we are putting attendees and players and whatever we can get for the dollar kind of accommodations. And we think there's a leveling up, from tournament operators. How do you set yourself up from a different TL? Well, how about the accommodations? From players, who have the choice in organizations. Okay, do I participate in an ESL tournament? Do I participate in a PGL? Do I participate in a Blast esports event? Well, how do you get them to choose your tournament, outside of the prize pool? Well, it's the player experience, it's the accommodations, it's the leveling up. So that is our entryway into this particular kind of venue. So I think whatever your expertise is, there are a lot of things that are transferable, so figure out your expertise, figure out how you can enhance the space, and then that's your entry point. I will jump back in terms of where I see the future of esports once other people have contributed.
Jack, I'd love to have you jump in just from the player side that Neil was just mentioning. You're coming from still a student, went back to being in school after winning a championship, right, in the NBA 2K League. And I think it'd be great for everybody to kind of understand, for you, where do you see the industry going?
Yeah, I think Neil makes a lot of really good points, because I think, like, fundamentally people go to sports games, or hopefully esports games in the future, as a fan to have a good time. And that, like, good time experience, I think, is lagging a bit in esports. So I think as a player, obviously it's more fun to play under that environment, but if you're trying to create, like, a more attractive ecosystem for outside sponsors, and, like, show growth projections that are, like, give hope to this industry, I think, like, that's the approach you want to take. I also think, like, games in general are gonna, like, you see it more and more. I think there's more uninterrupted like sponsorship and activation opportunities. Um, and that's a little bit less in competitive esports, but I think that's just more in the gaming industry as a whole. Um, but I think just as a player, like, we want to feel like, people are there because they want to be there. And I think like that's the next level. Like, how can we get fans that aren't necessarily diehard esports fans into these experiences?
That's good. Chris, I know you want to jump in. I saw.
Yeah, yeah. So because it just builds off of what Neil and Jack are saying so well, I think, and as the educator, I'm going to say I think uh, esports and education is what might lead to a bright future or contribute to one within esports, right? Because uh, creates an official pipeline potentially to have more jacks in the world, right? They are able to play in middle and high school and really learn that they're great at this and have that under a structured environment where they can learn things that James at Fit Gamer are teaching them about some of these things, right? Like that's so vitally important of approaching it in a health and well-being and just supervised environment. But also, to Neil's point, enter the space where you're good at or with what you're good at, right? And how are we going to know, or how are these learners going to know what they're good at if they don't have any exposure to it until it's too late, right? And so I really think that if we can develop their skills, transferable skills, as Neil put them, through the lens of esports and their passion, that we'll have more proficient workers entering the workforce out of high school or college, right? Like they'll understand what they're good at. They will have professional experience at a very young age. And like, so not only will we have more professional players, we'll have more professionals that are able to increase revenue, provide an entertainment experience, like do all of these things through the lane that they chose. I think that's so vitally important.
That's great points. Thanks for sharing, Chris. Albert, I mean, you come from an interesting background, having been with an esports org that put out a $20 million fund to talk about content creators. And I'm talking about Misfits Gaming. And I don't know if you can touch on that because as we know now, they ended up downsizing a lot. That same office that you're probably in and all of that is probably down to less employees than it was. Is that something that we need to be concerned with within the industry as a whole in terms of what happened? I know you're at another org currently in what you're doing, but you can bring that perspective for us so we can see it holistically.
Yeah, I mean, I think Misfits was hit by esports winter, much like most esports operators in the space. And they chose to hard pivot. They chose to divest all their esports interests and investment. I think as of today, they only have one remaining esports team, and that's their CDL team, because that's a franchise league, and they're like committed to. It's a joint venture with Team Heretics over in Spain, so it's kind of like a lower cost operation and kind of more. The margins are a little bit better than some other esports they could be in, or it's too good for them to pull out just yet. But they pivoted to. They had a really interesting pivot. I mean, when I was there, they cut all the esports teams, and then they kind of pivoted to Roblox game development. So they were like a game studio mostly for a while. I've heard recently that that's been shut down for the most part, or they've severely downsized. I think the whole office is remote now. So we went from having an office, we had like 4 or 5 different teams each year that I was operating, and then we were down to one joint venture team. And I think much like I think right now it's either most esports orgs are in let's batten down the hatches, let's get through, let's just survive. Survival is kind of the most important for the company, and then if they come out the other side whenever esports winter is over, when the investment comes back in, maybe they'll jump back into the space. But in terms of the creators, I think it's just I think Jack was saying earlier. I think the investment in the gaming space right now is most of the money, most of the advertising dollars, most of the sponsorships are going towards creators rather than esports teams. And I think fundamentally it's just because we haven't been able to figure out how to monetize esports properly in the way that the creator economy can monetize it. So creators, they stream every day, right? Or the big creators that get these massive sponsorship deals. They're streaming every day to their massive following, and they're constantly creating opportunities to kind of interact with sponsors and the product and whatever they're advertising. Whereas professional gamers, most of their time is spent practicing the game, which inherently doesn't lend itself to content creation as much as gaming content creators. So I think we're seeing a shift in those dollars where advertisers are, hey, like if we're gonna spend $1 million, we'd rather spend it on like a ninja, or we'd rather spend it on like a big streamer, right? As opposed to spending $1 million on like a Cloud9, on a Misfits, on a esports team like that. So that's kind of where I see the state of the industry.
Well, I mean, that's great to hear. And I think everybody's done a great job of really giving us different perspectives and different avenues of entry, so to speak. And I think, James, you can really be able to touch on, the creation of Fit Gamer and the approach and the model from a business standpoint would be great for the audience to really hear and understand and see how you're truly being able to impact the industry from Fit Gamer standpoint.
Yeah, sure thing. I'm going to build upon what Albert said a little bit first, and I'm going to dive straight into that. But most people don't realize that professional esports orgs are not profitable. It's not a sustainable model, and we've seen it time and time again. So like right now in the industry, there's only 2 pro orgs that are profitable, and those 2 pro orgs are 100 Thieves and Team Liquid. C9 was profitable when I was there, but they went from profitability in 2021 and 2022, and then they went into a pretty much a net negative when it came to 2023, and then they downsized. Like my department got sold off and other departments got laid off. And it's pretty common without the industry. And one of the biggest issues with that is revenue streams. These pro orgs, they're kind of merch companies in a way, right? Like if you look at 100 Thieves, for example, most of their revenue comes from merch sales. It doesn't come from sponsors. It doesn't come from anything else. It's mostly merch sales. When you looked at C9, same thing. Team Liquid, I'm sure their financials are also very similar. But as like all these pro orgs were kind of pushed up on VC funding, and now that VC funding is near impossible to get, it's very, very difficult. These orgs are having to downsize, whether it was Albert said with Misfits, whether it's if you're looking at Evil Geniuses right now. And I met with their CEO a little over a year ago and spoke to him about this, but they're downsizing to just one team. In that one team, that is a profitable model, and it's their team that won the VCT the other year. So it's kind of changing and it's evolving. No one really knows what the future looks like when it comes to sustainable models, but people are trying time and time again. So it's kind of cool to see. But kind of to answer your question, Craig, I mean, Figure kind of entered into the space to kind of show the model they used with C9. We started with C9 back in 2019, doing physical conditioning for their League of Legends team. And what we've noticed with that is these players that work out 5 days a week, every morning for about 1 to 2 hours. It increases their stamina levels. It increases their in-game dexterity, their spatial awareness, their critical thinking, and also just the biggest impact is their emotional state, right? When you're gaming, and I'm sure Jack can speak to this, and I used to play tier 2 professionally in the Counter-Strike scene, but your emotions get the best of you. When you're in a game, things are going wrong and you're getting heated, you get toxic, you can't think clearly, it starts to bleed over into your teammates, and then that kind of game goes down. But when you're actually working out regularly, sleeping regularly, and have a nutritious diet and also a balanced lifestyle, these players actually perform near their top level more consistently. So it's not about increasing their skill level per se, it's about increasing their worst day. So if your worst day is still a top ranked player, you're doing great. But if your best day is like Faker, but your worst day is like a tier 4 player, well, then you're very inconsistent. You're not going to stay in the pro scene for long. So it's about increasing that bottom line as much as possible with our holistic approach. But also like players are contracted to do this, right? So if you talk to anyone at C9, all their pro players have to train 5 days a week. It's in their contract. They use our Fit Gamer app, which kind of walks them through a lot of the training and stuff. But we also provide personal trainers in person to train. So that's kind of like our model and how we approach it. But I'm happy to expand upon that if you have any questions.
No, it's great to hear, and everybody should definitely go ahead and check out the website and be able to learn a little bit more about what you're doing. Even from a technology standpoint, that's a big shift that we're seeing. And Jack, even on your side, your pivot and your next move was going the entrepreneurial route that Chris can also appreciate in his side. Neil, all of us in the same moment. Just tell us a little bit more about blockchain and how that is kind of intertwined with your esports background.
Yeah, so I was building a little bit in blockchain in like 2022 because I just thought there was an obvious opportunity to provide like tangible value in a collectible ecosystem. But we've pivoted. But I think like fundamentally what I see is a real opportunity to integrate like brands and product into games that people enjoy. Um, and my bet is that like in the next 2 years, you're going to start to be able to like buy actual product in games. And then like, maybe in the same, 24 months from now to 36 months from now, like you're going to actually be able to extract tangible value from games. Because I just think like the game shipping experience is becoming so competitive. And it's so you can ship games and experiences so fast now that like it's going to be really hard to win over like user attention. Um, so yeah, I think, my focus right now is just, I'm building this like open world Roblox-esque ecosystem, but filled with like games that people love, like Mario Kart, like Cup Pong, like, a soccer game where you can compete for a currency that has real value. But that is not on blockchain. I think the issue with blockchain is like, I mean, there's a lot of things. I don't want to get too deep into it, but like you take the power, I think, out from the gamers, which I think was like the opposite of the intention, just because like the token a lot of times is subject to so much, shift in value. Um, but no, I encourage like I think there's so much opportunity to create in esports. I think it's so new. And I think like something that people aren't really thinking about necessarily right now is how can we like leverage the proprietary technology of electronic sports and apply it to traditional sport industries. Like, how can we allow your average person to race against Charles Leclerc, right? And like, there's an ability to do that. And I think like when you start to solve those disconnects, then you have an addressable market that's like so much bigger than even what we're talking about right now, which is like, I think for a lot of people, the problem or, something that they're trying to solve for.
No, but you're doing amazing things in that space and what you're doing, shifting after being a professional. Chris had an amazing panel yesterday on the entrepreneurial side, and it shows us the opportunity that lies not just, we use esports, but it's the gaming industry as a whole. There's so much similarities to traditional sports, and as you gentlemen have broken down in terms of the revenue streams and the model, and we hear about investment and we see these opportunities. At the same token, similar to the question posed on the chat, we do understand that now we have an Olympics, right? Esports Olympics and what's happening in the Middle East trying to take over that market. So looking at us in here in North America, how can we, North American and all the individuals here and those that want to break in and future students that want to study and those that may want to shift and get involved in this space, how can we truly impact the industry here in North America specifically when it relates to the future of esports and gaming? And anybody can kind of jump on that.
I'll hop in just because I in 2021 or just end of 2020, December 2020, I was fortunate enough to play for Team USA in NBA 2K in the first ever FIBA Esports Open. And just talking about the growth of Olympics, quote unquote, in 2K at least. When we played, obviously it was during COVID, but it was really interesting to see the 2K community come together because it wasn't about like the top tier professionals. It was about like you playing for your country. And I think that brought a lot of people together that, had never spoken. And that, there was like, we were tapping into unknown communities, which I think was super powerful. And now like they host, a North American competition, and then competitions for the rest of the world. And then you play the, round of 16 through the finals in one location. And then I think that just presents so many cool opportunities for games and for fans to appreciate different cultures and bring people together. And I think that's the really powerful thing about a potential esports Olympics. But I do, it's super tricky to really envision what that looks like at scale, just because, these games and their audiences and player pools are changing so fast.
Well, we just had League of Legends Worlds, right, last week before,
Yeah.
whatever, and prior to that, I remember the Chase Arena for last year's Worlds and how packed that event was, and the fact that this year was a little different. Market teams for baseball, the Dodgers versus my Yankees. I'm not even going to dwell on that one, but in years past, that you could watch a World Series match, Game 5 of the World Series, and then compare it to Game 5 of League of Legends Worlds a few years ago, and the viewership was a lot higher for Worlds. And we're talking about in comparison to a major league sport in Major League Baseball. That's something for us to tout and something for us to look at. What is it that we need to do consistently here in North America for us to be able to, and Neil, this might be on your end in terms of bringing those mega events and then allowing us to be able to convince the traditional sports audience that you need to be over here? Or are we wrong? Do we need to keep the community where it is, acknowledge it, and then just, be able to conform to the esports community and let them know that's where the market is going to be?
Wow, there are like 5 or 6 points out there, between like the last 5 minutes of conversation. I think one of the things, I was out in Riyadh for the Esports World Cup, and so to sit here and see these 21 different game titles, the audiences that they bring, the people that were there consuming it was just amazing, and so I am I I was able to kind of see all the different audiences and all the different sponsors and everything come together, and I would say honestly they are perfectly situated to host, the Olympic version coming up. Boulevard City is just amazing. Another thing I think it is going to be interesting in terms of like the Olympic Games themselves, because in order, I think the first version of two, I wouldn't say watered down, but I think we have to grow to a point to where we're experiencing all those 22 titles. I think it's going to be a very conservative approach. I think it's probably going to be like sports sims in terms of titles, maybe like a Fortnite, probably be as sketchy as you get in terms of a title. There will be no Call of Duties and CS:GOs, involved of that. So I think the first version, it's just the overall model, getting people together, seeing how it works, seeing how the logistics of everything, because I don't think we're at a point to grow to like Red Blood on TV, or being consumed globally, But I do think that'll be cool. In terms of what can we do here in North America? I just go back to your core competencies. I mean, we all help stand this industry up, and we all play a part in this. And so I think it's just getting back to your core competencies. I think a lot of the differentiation in the models in terms of the content creator stuff, and I think it's happened because we've moved away from the core competencies that built this industry up. The money was coming in. Hey, let's try this. Let's try this. I think the market is shrinking. We're self-correcting. And now it's all about your core competencies. What do you do well? What do you bring to the table? So for us, I think one of the biggest changes that I've seen is that the gaming and esports world no longer views hospitality and tourism as a transactional action. We need hotel space. XYZ is the dollar amount. We need rooms. This now it is more of a collaborative process in terms of the Fortune 500 investments not there. We're not operating on seed money. We actually have to pull these events off with legit dollars that we either have or we don't have. So now what are we doing? We are actually reaching out to country tourism boards as a way to supplement some of this, as a way to incur some of the costs, spread some of the risk out. We are reaching out to destination marketing organizations or convention bureaus in terms of financial assistance. We are looking at national or regional or independent hotels in terms of, hey, what can you do to help cover some of the costs, or what can you do to help level up the experience or connect us to the community, or how can our attendees know that when they're in New York, it's a complete experience in New York, and when we're in DC, this is a complete experience in DC, and everybody, fan, attendee that's there can take that in. that's kind of where I'm getting in terms of like it is more collaborative, and we're getting back to core competencies. And like I said, with the shrinking of the business model, with the lack of dollars available to kind of put on all these, it has to be collaborative. You have to bring in the tourism board, you have to bring in the convention bureau, you have to bring in the hotel companies, you have to bring in what sponsors are still in the field playing, and you have to kind of cut some of the fat on what you're looking at. But I think there are opportunities like this is a huge Airbnb kind of community. Are there partnerships, that you can work out with Airbnb and Verbo? This is a huge Uber, Lyft kind of world. Are there partnerships that you can work out with there to create that experience? So I think just in North America, stick to your core competencies. If we're all doing that, we are leveling up in North America, which then is leveling up the industry and the global ecosystem.
Level up in our markets. So those out there, I think you can jump in the promoter space and bring it on. The time is now. Albert, I think we need to hear about the player side and the player pathway and really have an audience. Chris, you may have it at your school, countless schools that have esports, but even if we're talking about adolescents, a lot of us, on my end, I have an academy where I'm consistently with a group of 12 to 17-year-olds. And as we're building it and trying to let them know about transferable skills in gaming, there are some that may be talented and want to know what is the pathway, right? Or even we heard Jack talk about, and I actually didn't know that, Jack, so thanks for that opportunity and sharing that about your Olympic experience. Kudos to you on that one. But Albert, what's the pathway if we're talking about having aspiring talent that want to go from amateur to professional? James, you might be able to jump in on this as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the pipeline's changed much. I think it's become easier to rise to the top, given the advent of streaming. I think before it was players weren't really streaming their gameplay, or it wasn't, I think the new generation of pros, you're seeing they're much more content oriented. They're much more willing to turn on the stream while they play ranked. I don't think the pathway's changed. I mean, I think it's just you're competing at whatever level, you're starting at tier 3, or actually before tier 3, you're starting at the rank leaderboard. I think simple, just play whatever, the ranked version of your game mode is, or of your chosen game is. See if you can get a high rank, first of all. And if you think like, hey, I'm like top 500, for example, I think that's a good benchmark because every pro player is like at least top 500 in their respective esports. So I would say get on the rank leaderboard, grind your way to top 500. Once you hit top 500, then that's when I would start looking for amateur teams, right? So that's your tier 3s. That's your, you have no org. You're just a bunch of ranked players that, you found on your, while you're grinding the game. Put a team together. See if you can make it. See if you can beat any teams. See how competition feels. Because again, I think competition is not for everyone. I think there's some very talented players that don't really work on teams, or they'd rather just make content around playing ranked. There's plenty of content creators like that, and that are quite big, right? You don't have to. There's many different paths to success, I would say, to become instead of becoming pro. But if you're committed to that, if you're really good, tier 3, then tier 2. So that's when you start getting semi-pro. There's some sponsors. There's some smaller orgs that might reach out and give you a little bit of money to play. There's academy teams, right? Then after that, you kind of work your way up. It's a pretty like clear ecosystem. I would say in almost any esport, like how to get to the top. It's just tier 3 feeds into tier 2, feeds into tier 1. And then tier 1, that's like I tell all the players that I sign like rookies, they grinded all those years to get to where they are. But like once you hit tier 1, that's like when it actually starts, right? Because that's when like there's a limited amount of people at the top and you're constantly competing. There's constantly new players, just like those rookies that come up every year. Like they're starting at 15, they're becoming pro at 15, right? It's like super, super competitive at the top. So yeah, I would say start young for sure if you want to have the best shot at becoming pro in any game. And just follow the path that's laid out in your esport, because there already is a robust one in every single one.
Thanks for sharing that, Albert. I mean, I want to point out to the audience, everybody on here, that you mentioned content quite a bit within your response, and content seems to be a king and drive the industry. We've had some panels earlier on in this conference dealing with NIL, and you kind of hear name, image, and likeness on there, and I think that there are a lot of similarities. And you're just mentioning it from an esports perspective, gaming perspective, to make sure that they are definitely understanding that they are a brand in their own right, and you're saying that the org has to embrace this. I think, Jack, you can attest to that on your side as being a professional and having to go ahead and grind out on the game, but also recognizing that you are a brand, and how can I monetize my brand beyond my salary from the NBA 2K League. I had to think about whatever else I can do outside of that, and that small window that kind of came in. So, Jack, I don't know if you want to jump on that, and then I'm going to come to James to kind of get that flip side, because it's not all great at the very end of the day, right, James? And that the mental and physical well-being of the athlete. And yes, they are athletes, everybody, and we can debate on it as much as we want. But Chris will be able to tell us from an academic perspective and everything else on there. This is an academic discipline with esports, right? We can both share in that. But at the same token, they are athletes. So, Jack, just jump in on there from your brand, that you are a brand and a former professional athlete.
Yeah, I think Albert made a lot of really good points. Beyond just streaming for the sake of monetizing, like if your goal is to play professionally, or it may not be your goal, like you open up so many opportunities by allowing people to understand you and know you as a person. And I think, like Albert, like you were saying, when you get to that tier one, there's so much, like, it's so hard to differentiate people in terms of skill. Like there's so much to be said for being a good teammate, and like there's so much like intangible value that goes into the best teams. And people want to, like, when people are taking a risk or bringing you on, people really, really want to have confidence that you're actually going to elevate the team beyond just your ability to play the game. Um, and then, yeah, I mean, the brand is huge. Like I play college tennis now, and I've gotten an NIL deal because of esports. Like it's, you can't say enough about like your brand, and also just taking what you post on social media serious, and like really trying to, I mean, I'm sure people have heard this a bunch, but like establish values, and like try and align your decision making with how you want to be perceived, because stuff really doesn't go away. But like on the flip side, I think you can create this reputation that like supersedes your performance in anything you do. Um, and I think like it's really hard for gamers who are so just only dedicated to their gameplay to maintain perspective. And then, James, I'm sure you can touch on this, but like that's when the mental health comes into question, where like the game is the only thing that's, you know, that matters to you. Because you're not approaching it holistically. So that's definitely my thoughts. Just, be super, super, super open-minded. And yeah, always think bigger picture, because you never know like how long something's going to last.
Well said. And you threw it to James. Perfect segue there, because even in the midst of that, we still have to deal with the physical and mental well-being of the athletes. How are you doing that, James? And what are you seeing on your side?
Yeah, I mean, it's most people think the hardest path is getting to the pro scene, like Albert and Jack have mentioned, but it's not. The hardest path is staying in the pro scene. We're seeing such a high turnover rate with pro players, where some people's careers last 6 months, some people's careers last 2 years, and then it just ends abruptly. They don't really get to control when they exit. Now you have some content creators like Shroud, for example, like Albert was alluding to. I mean, he's the most prominent pro player that swapped to content creation. That's now probably the largest content creator name when it comes to like from the pro player scene. But sustainability is everything. I was mentioning earlier, but like Cloud9 players, like the mental aspect, like the best way to fix your mental is by doing physical exercising. Like that is absolutely the best way to do it. But in addition to that, we also teach something called reframing. And reframing is when you're playing in game and something goes wrong, instead of thinking negatively about yourself and about what you did, you think positively about it. And you always reframe these negative thoughts into positive thoughts. And eventually it conditions your mind to always be in a more uplifted mood. And it kind of controls your emotional state as well. You teach it in each player individually, not just to the team. And as long as each player has those components and those skill sets, it kind of congregates into like a really healthy like team environment. And then you can see these players play for longer periods of time. And an example of this would be Fudge, the top laner from C9 previously. He was in the pro scene for what, 3 to 4 years. And he started and he was overweight at first. He was struggling with his health and his confidence levels and is also just mental overall well-being. And as he worked out 5 days a week, as he ate healthier, as he got more sleep, as he like focused not just on the pro scene, but focused on a lifestyle balance, right? It's like, okay, I have practice from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. today. Afterwards, we're gonna go play basketball. Afterwards, we're gonna go to the beach. Afterwards, we're gonna go maybe go bowling or whatever it may be. They're not just so fixated on one point. They're fixated on the overall lifestyle, and that's what they need in the pro scene is a balance. Because right now, at a lot of these pro orgs, there's no balance. It is grind, grind, grind. You get exhausted, you get physically exhausted, mentally exhausted, you're not getting enough sleep, and then you burn out. And then you get kicked out of the scene, and then you're done. Your career's over, and you don't know where else to go. I mean, I know we keep talking about a pathway from collegiate to pro, but we're kind of seeing a pathway from pro to collegiate. These pro players get burnt out, they fall down, and then these colleges, whether I mean Chris can speak to this, they start picking up all these pro players for their college teams. And now in the college leagues, it's not fair because you have pro players playing against college players, right? So it's a serious issue that we're working on. We're definitely trying to train these players at the college level. We're contracted with about a dozen universities right now, not just training their teams in game, but also providing that holistic approach with the physical training and mental training as well. So hopefully that changes going into the future, but we'll have to see. It's still new, and players have a hard time grabbing onto it because the first time they get introduced to this lifestyle is in the pro scene.
Love it. And James, you threw it to Chris perfectly in that note, because we can look at it from a college athletic perspective and see how many student athletes are generating revenue from gaming on their side. And even prior to getting to college, I've seen 14, 15. I mean, there's cases out there, and we're telling them. But to your point, James, the life cycle can still be slim. What is it that you're doing next? Jack, if I'm not mistaken, it's about around 50,000 is the salary for an NBA 2K player. And then from there, you have the opportunity to split a prize pool of maybe $2 million now today. And we're talking about 3 or 4 months of work. So for our audience to really hear that. But James, to your point, in the collegiate scene, now we have to be able to maintain the integrity of the sport. And where is that going? And where's the competitive balance? If my institution has this particular player who already went pro and did this in CSGO or the CDL league, so on and so forth, and now is competing at the collegiate level, how are we going to maintain that balance? Chris, I don't know if you want to touch on that.
Yeah, sure. And I focus a lot on the academic side, but when I was at Shenandoah University before moving over to WVU, I coached our Call of Duty team. And let me tell you, from one week to the next, it could be drastically different, right? And we had a team that went from pub stomping, right? They just knew search and destroy in pubs to top 20 in the country just by tweaking a few things to thinking we are one of the best in the country. And they were on paper. And then playing a team of 3 former pros and 1 top AM quickly puts things in perspective as to, okay, well, we've gotten a lot better, but like maybe we're not quite at that next level yet. And so, I mean, you're starting to see leagues, at Edge, we work a lot with like NACE, Playfly, all of these different leagues, and they're starting to implement Varsity Plus, Varsity Premier, like these schools that will pay a little more to have that, I don't want to say elite competition because I don't want to degrade anything that's happening at that level, but teams that have 2 or 3 pros want to play other teams with 2 or 3 pros, right? And so we're starting to see these leagues kind of start offering these things to not only increase parity of play, right? Which is such a huge thing in traditional sports. It's like people don't like watching the Browns for a decade, right? Because it just wasn't good. And if there's any Browns fans in here, sorry, but I'm a Titans fan. I can relate. But parity of play is really important, not only for the development of players, but the development of the product and the league. But yeah, I mean, what we've gone back to is overall an underlying tone of like professionalism and engagement, right? Is I think what esports is missing, and whether that's engaging through content, engaging through large scale mega events, whatever that might be, that's what these leagues are starting to also look at, right? Is how can we make it more engaging? How can we make the product that's being streamed better? And so there's a shift in the leagues. All that to be said, like long story short, yes, the parity of play is kind of all over the place right now. The leagues acknowledge it, and they're working to deal with that. And then as professional staff at an institution. Our Rocket League team, all three of our players are pros currently. We're back-to-back national champions, which is awesome. But we also have to manage that team a lot differently than a club team, right? And so just looking at how we can adjust their approach to competition, how we can find other top teams, and then not ruin someone else's experience at another institution because we do have pros, right? And so the landscape's changing. It's coming. I promise. Talking with these leagues, we're just not quite there yet.
Love it. Thanks, Chris. Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't shout out the APUS Esports fully online institution having their first athletic team to be able to go and compete. And, when you look at the military and all the advantages of gaming we've seen around, you would think that would make the opportunity for them to be able to really do really well in these various titles, especially some of those FPS titles and so on and so forth. But I'll tell you, I've seen young 13, 14-year-olds beating up on adults or pro gamers doing their thing. So the disparity and the entry point in terms of getting in, it's not there. I just remember I went to a Smash tournament in my market, and the winner was a 14-year-old. It was a 14-year-old freshman, not even in college, and it's like, oh, where are you? Somebody needs to start to recruit you because you're beating some of and these are collegiate athletes that participated in this as well. And this 14-year-old high school student. So I'm sure that individual is going to have scholarship on his or her mind at that moment when they have the opportunity to kind of move forward. I want to be able to, throw it in as questions and set something on there. Go ahead and chime in on the chat. We'd love to be able to ask our guests some questions that you may have, but we'll keep this going on our side. I really want to shift it back on the academician side and thinking about not everybody can be a pro, right? Not everybody's set out to go ahead and be an entrepreneur. So we have to be able to think about those that have their entryway in terms of academic careers and what we're preparing in terms of the industry and then where they're kind of going. And I mean, if we look at everybody here on this particular conference, we can see what those opportunities are. But if you guys could just dive in, let's talk it about a little bit and really be able to say, where is it that I can go, after? And, we have now, I think about it 20 years ago, sports management, maybe it's more than that, but I'm thinking back 20 years ago, sports management, you look at it, the traditional route. I'm an athlete. I'm automatically going to study the academic discipline of sport management. I think I'm going to have something easy to get into. I'm not really seeing it as the chemistry major, so on and so forth. You fast forward 20 years, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong. I see esports as being, in terms of the academic discipline, what sports management was, where we're still having to convince, right, our own industry academician colleagues that there is a need for this. Right, even though there's countless institutions that have academic programs, whether it's a major, minor, and/or specialization, or just an entry-level course to wet you in. But now we have to be able to connect the dots and show that there are industry jobs and careers for students to be able to be trained and now enter into these roles. Any of you want to go ahead and touch on that?
Yeah, I can jump in on that one. I mean, I just recently graduated from UCLA with my MBA, and there you have a sports management specialization. There's no esports management specialization. And if I ever bring that up, people just look at me because these are people usually between the ages of 30 to 45, and esports is such a foreign thing to them. And even the university as well, right? Like, even though we had the CFO of Genji, like, speaking at panels there, even though we've had some professors with a little bit of experience in the industry, it's still so foreign to them that no one wants to touch it. And we're starting to see some universities trying to create programs to not just train people to go into like the pro scene, but the train that go into management, because most of the jobs is not as a pro player. Most of the jobs is in management in some capacity. Now, obviously, management has their own high turnover rates, which Albert can probably talk to as well. But I mean, that is where the majority of the jobs lie, and that's where we should be training people to go towards. Because too many people want to go pro, and only 0.01% of them actually reach the pro scene. And Boise State right now, I teach 4 classes currently, but those 4 classes on esports management, they're focused on building the skills so that you can go into the management level, right? It's not to go pro, it's to go pro at a management level. And that's kind of the goal that we should be focusing on going into the future if we want to grow our scene. Then also, like I talked about this about 40 minutes ago, but sustainability. We need to teach them, what does a sustainable industry look like, and how can we give them the skills to create that sustainability, right? So that's kind of like my opinion on the matter, but I'm sure some others have some other opinions as well.
I think I'll jump in from a different lens, a different viewpoint, and I graduated from the University of Oregon, since I think I heard you say UCLA. We're both Big Ten now. With a business administration major, emphasis in sports management. We didn't have gaming and esports. It was a while ago, but I think my perspective is, I think, Craig, what you're kind of getting to is the overall bigger question, just in terms of jobs and pathways, in this industry, and I think because gaming, esports, I think there's more of an emphasis on the gaming in its totality now, that I do think it lends itself to other disciplines coming in, just generic disciplines across the board. Companies, organizations need marketers to be able to cut through the clutter. Organizations need legal, in terms of even, what's the prize pool in a different country as opposed to somewhere in Texas, and what are the laws on that? I think in terms of James's area right now, in terms of nutrition and health and stuff like that, general health people. Now, it does help to have an understanding, background, a core competency in this, but there are so many different disciplines that now are applicable, because, like I said, a lot of this stuff is transferable, that you can kind of come in. So I I got into the hospitality tourism job industry in 2000, because I was a sports. I worked for the Angels, the Mighty Ducks, pro hockey, baseball, ESPN, and through that I connected with the convention bureau here in Las Vegas, and then got into this hospitality world. So I mean, but ever since 2016, when I was with MGM, I am in a generic hospitality esports discipline. But since 2016, my whole job has been working on gaming and esports, nothing but. So there are disciplines that transfer over. So it's not just coaches, management, production, on air, behind the camera, in front of the camera. There are just generic disciplines: legal, marketing, tourism, hospitality, that apply to this space. So I would say, I mean, if you want a concentrationist, by all means, knock yourself out. But there are so many other disciplines to where a top organization they're not bringing in gaming and esports marketers. They're bringing in marketers from other companies who just have a pinpoint understanding of that to help this discipline.
Yeah, and I want to piggyback off of that, Neil. I think that's such a good point. It's not about what the piece of paper says; it's about the experience. I think the esports specific, and that sounds crazy coming from an academic director of an esports program, right? But we reach a population of learners that otherwise might not have been at our institution, I feel. But we also cross and find people that would go into marketing, and now they want to go into esports and focus on marketing. But experience trumps what that piece of paper says, right? I mean, Neil just rattled off a plethora of different things that you went through to get to where you're at today, right? And like that speaks for itself. And so I think, looking at it and that pathway forward for learners, you have to get the experience. But you also, as leaders in the field, I think we have to set healthy expectations as well, right? I saw it in sport management when I worked in sport management. Everyone wanted to be the GM of the Lakers. There's one of those, right? But you know how that person got there, probably? I don't know who the GM right now currently is, but they probably got there starting in sales or starting in facility management or doing these things that are vitally important to help the industry grow and to get that experience that Neil's talking about, right? So you're talking about different pathways and stuff. Students roll their eyes at me, but they say, where should I start? Marketing, sales, business administration, hospitality, community management, all of these different things, maybe even health and nutrition. James and his company are doing an amazing job. There's a whole industry out there, right? And so, we try to set healthy expectations for our learners, and we don't want to stifle their dreams. But, not to use like business 101 terms, but everyone wants to be an entrepreneur in esports right now. But the industry needs a ton of entrepreneurs, right? Just extremely savvy and driven people to work those 9 to 5s, or 9 to 9s in esports, to get the job done, right? Not everyone has to start their own org. You can go sell tickets for an org and make a huge impact, right? And so getting that experience is so important, but teaching these transferable skills in the classroom so that they're prepared for esports or a different career cluster. That's how we approach it, at least. But I agree with Neil, James, exactly what you are saying.
Well said there. Thanks, Chris. Albert, there's a question for you on what do you recommend for coaches and analysts trying to get experience with professional orgs? This individual works in the collegiate scene and has been trying to intern and or volunteer with the orgs and isn't sure where to go next to better their skills. What would you tell them, Albert?
Yeah, before I answer that question, just want to,
Jump.
echo some of the sentiments that were said about the previous question. So I think much like sports management, like an esports management degree isn't a replacement for actual esports management, right? Which means like you get the experience. It's not just because you have a piece of paper that says, hey, I studied sports management, I studied esports management. You still need companies will still value an actual esport management experience over a piece of paper that says, hey, I kind of understand the general concepts. I kind of understand it from like an academia standpoint, but not really necessarily an execution standpoint. It's not a replacement. It's a supplement. So I would say it's pretty easy. I mean, okay, I don't want to say easy because like I think a lot of it is luck. You need somebody to say yes. You need somebody to take you on, even if you volunteer. There's many different pathways to kind of having a career in esports. But yeah, I would say if you're in school for esports right now and you're wondering how to get in, or you're thinking about how to get in, my answer is just do it. Just try it, right? Like just try. If you like graphic design, like make some edits of your, make some banners for some random streamer, make some banners for your, like your friend or your favorite streamer, and just see if that feels good, right? Get some feedback on that. See if that's something you have talent in, see if that's something you're good at. Management, same thing. Like start at tier 3, start like manage scrims or book scrims, manage a team at like the amateur level, see how that feels, right? Like if you can't do it at that level, you're not gonna be able to do it at the next level. If you don't like it at that level, you're definitely not gonna like it when there's actual stakes on the table. So I would just say start, like what Neil said, like know what you're good at, or maybe if you don't know what you're good at yet, what you think you're good at, and then see if that's something that could be feasible. So I would just say like just jump in. And then to answer Adrian's question in the chat, what do you recommend for coaches and analysts trying to get experience with professional orgs? So yeah, so I mean, I think just keep volunteering. From a coach standpoint, like I hired a ton of coaches when I worked in Overwatch and Valorant and all the other esports Rocket League. I would say, do you have a portfolio? And if you don't, you should. You should, have some analysis, something easy to digest. You could just send out like, hey, take a look at my portfolio. I would say most of the time they probably don't read, a cold DM like that, but that's like just the nature of reaching out in general and cold outreach. Like you just have to keep going. You have to, but have your portfolio ready on hand, apply to every position you see, apply to positions you don't see, right? Like I think a lot of tier 1 orgs would love to have a volunteer analyst, right? Like a lot of people, like especially in Valorant, they get their start, hey, like here, let me just do scouting reports, right, for your team. Like here's a scouting report. If you find this useful, like I'm happy to, I don't need a salary. I just want to get my foot in the door. I want to get some experience. I think a lot of esports orgs would love to have like qualified um prospects basically. You're just trying, like think of it as like a trial for the job, or a future job. So yeah, I would say keep trying to intern, keep trying to volunteer, um, work on your portfolio if you don't have one. If you have one, make sure it's constantly updated with, relevant, um, with like the most up to date relevant teams in whatever esport you're doing. So that's my suggestion.
Adrian, I hope you got that and took some notes on that one. A great response, Albert. Let's go ahead and get to Tyler. Tyler Hicks has a question. Working with Air Force Gaming, I think one of the biggest issues that he sees is people wanting to manage a branch of the organization, where they should just really want to just play games as opposed to building and networking within the organization. And he wants to know if anyone's ever run into similar issues in your experience. I don't know if that relates to anybody. Want to jump in on Tyler's question?
I'll jump in here. The best gaming organizations I've been a part of, the coach has been like definitely understands the game, but really dives into the role of like being a facilitator and keeping everybody locked in, allowing for trying to facilitate as much like off court or not off court, off game, fun as possible. Like I think to be successful, like you need somebody who really holds the fort down, like you said, helps network the team, like takes responsibility and ownership for like your brand affinity and like, kind of creates a culture where everyone is accountable for the image of the team. Cause I think like that makes people want to practice more. And then I think you become a lot more attractive to, potential partners or whatever. So I can imagine that's super frustrating because those things don't happen if somebody just wants to play a game. And I think you should encourage that person to look at any successful organization outside of gaming, and like that all starts usually, obviously the players need to buy in, but there needs to be some like form of structure to make that work, Tyler.
Great response. Anybody else want to chime in on that?
I think
All right.
I'll jump in. I've worked with Navy, the branch of Navy's gaming, a good friend who was with Army before, and was trying to get in with Air Force Gaming. I think they go through Rally Cry that does a lot of their stuff. But I think from I think from an organizational level, working with them, it's a very different world. You have to sit down here, and some of the titles don't match up to what some of the generic titles and organizations and companies. So there are definite SOPs, standard operating procedures within the military. That's how they keep everybody safe and regimented and all that stuff. So I think one of the best things you can do when you're there is that you have to get a thorough understanding of the lay of the land. Sometimes at a dollar amount of investment, the general needs to sit here and have sign off. Other times it's the people for morale, welfare, and recreation whose job is to uh, deal with the total 360 experience of the individual, armed force uh, serviceman or woman. But there are so many protocols and so many things, and it's very rigid, but it has to be, So I think you have to kind of go in there and figure out who does this, who does that, what is that name called, what is this name called, why do you do this? I mean, there's protocols at the yin yang, but they just are. And it took me a while to kind of get through things, and I had to meet with like several civilians and military personnel and see what's going on. But the biggest thing I would say is it is just a completely different monster in terms of organizational structure. The biggest thing that you can do is learn the structure. I mean, like the Air Force, they've got like I think 28 battalions, or in it they break the world out into 28 different regions, and then this person is responsible for. You have to learn all of that, So there's a lot of education and learning to deal with the military or any government agency that's dipping their toes in the gaming and esports.
Well said.
I would add something too, maybe not in this context because I don't have the experience with the different branches through the lens of esports, but what I've found with this next wave of people we're hiring, right, is exactly what Tyler laid out, right? The expectation doesn't match the reality on both fronts. And what we've done for the academic side, but also the business side on the edge front is pick a task that is going to be constant in that role, might not be the flashiest, and as part of the interview process or something, build a project around it, right? And see what result comes out of that. If they don't want to do it, they're going to drop out of the race for the position. But found that's a really great way to kind of filter through this influx of young people that, again, maybe their expectation is just a little skewed, right? And they think it's one thing and it's not. And then when they get a little taste of it, they're like, I don't think this is right for me. And so that's helped me personally when we're hiring for the company. But again, I don't know in this context if that would be beneficial, but just want to throw it out there.
Love it. All right, gentlemen, as we're closing up, and for all those watching and may watch this after the fact on the future of esports and gaming over here, quick rapid round. You're either optimistic, you're pessimistic, or you're indifferent in this particular moment moving forward on the future of esports and gaming. I'll jump it out, and I'm optimistic on my end. On my end, go for it, James. I see you next in frame. Jack, you're after. Keep it going. Let's hear it.
I'm gonna go with optimistic as well.
All right, good stuff, Jack.
I'm pessimistic on esports as we know it, but I'm optimistic on electronic sports.
Okay, all right, Neil, go for it.
I'm with Jack. I think there's not on the optimism or pessimism, but I think you have to look at. I'm optimistic on both fronts, but on esports, we have to clean our act up, and we are doing that right now. Unfortunately, it's hurting a lot of people. But I think from this point on, I think we have to look at esports within the context of gaming. And in gaming, I'm definitely optimistic.
Love it. Thank you, Albert.
Yeah, I would say I'm optimistic on gaming. You know, cautiously pessimistic on esports given, my experiences. And I think the problem with esports is very simple. We haven't been able to crack the monetization problem. And I think if we do that, then I'll be optimistic. But so far it's, that I think that's the biggest problem is monetization, or successful monetization at scale for esports in general.
And Chris?
Yeah, I think I'm optimistic to touch on Albert's point. If we can find the way to further engage with fans, right? Get that fan identity for teams and brands rather than for individual creators. And so, optimistic if we can increase fan engagement and also have a workforce of proficient and savvy young professionals that are entering this space. So, optimistic overall.
Love it. Ladies and gents, that concludes our session. If you want to reach out to any of our panelists over here, and or myself, everybody's on LinkedIn, correct?
Yes.
There we go. Find the name, add them on LinkedIn. Have a good one. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Craig.
Awesome,
Take
y'all.
care.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Craig.
everyone.
Peace, love, esports.